In the thick tropical night of northern Haiti's mountains, where jagged ridges rise like frozen waves of emerald, there once stood a fortress so improbable it felt like a fever dream carved in stone. Sans-Souci, a French phrase meaning without worry, was built with the blood and fire of men and women who, only a few years earlier, had shattered their chains forever. In 1813, while Europe still trembled beneath Napoleon's boots, a man who crowned himself King Henri Christophe ordered this palace raised not on the flat, humid plains of the old sugar plantations, but halfway up a mountain where clouds drifted across red-tiled roofs like restless ghosts. More than 300 rooms, marble staircases wide enough for an entire regiment to march abreast, endless corridors where footsteps echoed like cathedral bells, and a private theater that could seat 1,000 souls. All of it completed in just 3 years by the very hands that had once worn iron shackles on this same soil. The man who commanded its creation was Henri Christophe, former slave, former grenadier, former revolutionary general, now self-proclaimed king of northern Haiti. Born in Grenada, sold into Saint-Domingue as a boy, he had once worked as a hotel cook in Cap Français when in 1791, the first whispers of freedom ignited the greatest slave revolt the world had ever seen. 2 decades later, he stood at the pinnacle of power, yet he was haunted by a single, gnawing fear that the world would never believe a nation of black people could build a real country, a real civilization. So he needed a monument, not merely a residence, but a black Versailles, a defiant cathedral of stone and iron hurled at everyone who had ever claimed that people of African blood were fit only to wield hoes and feel the lash. To raise Sans-Souci, Christophe mobilized nearly 200,000 souls, almost the entire population of his kingdom. They hauled blocks of marble from the coast-up slopes more than 800 meters high, along trails so steep that one misstep meant death. Thousands perished on that mountain, from exhaustion, malaria, beatings, or falls from flimsy bamboo scaffolding. Yet no one was allowed to stop. Christophe himself often rode up the narrow paths to inspect progress, his eyes cold and sharp as a blade, and whenever his silhouette appeared on the ridge, the sound of hammers on stone grew frantic. He wanted the palace finished before age slowed him, before Europe realized a black kingdom was rising right under their noses. While Sans-Souci rose in the north, a different Haiti was taking shape in the south under Alexandre Pétion, once Christophe's brother-in-arms, now his bitterest rival. They had fought side by side in the burning nights of 1802, had watched Cap Français become a sea of flame, had together driven the French into the ocean. But when freedom finally came, the two men chose radically different paths. Pétion believed in personal liberty, in giving land to peasants, in a gentle republic. Christophe believed in iron discipline, in forced labor for the nation's survival, in a crown strong enough to shield a newborn black nation from the hungry eyes of empires. Sans-Souci was not just a palace, it was the glittering mask of a brutal system. Every dawn, as the sun broke over Morne-Jean, brass trumpets sounded from the courtyard, signaling another day of toil. Farmers were compelled to work the royal plantations from 5 in the morning until 7 at night, granted only 1 hour of rest beneath the blazing sun. Those who fled were hunted by the Royal Honor Guard, black soldiers in scarlet British-style uniforms, and publicly flogged. Christophe called it the corvée, Royal Labor Service, and insisted it was the only way to keep Haiti safe from French reconquest. But to many, it felt as if they had merely traded white masters' chains for black ones. In 1818, with the palace nearly complete, Christophe invited European diplomats up the mountain. They walked through perfectly manicured orange and coffee groves, past marble fountains imported from Italy, past bas-reliefs of lions and eagles, deliberate copies of Europe's own symbols of power. The visitors bowed politely, but in their hearts they refused to believe black hands could have created such splendor. One French officer wrote in his diary, "The palace is magnificent, yet I still hear the crack of the whip in every brick." In the summer of 1820, the first stroke struck Henri Christophe while he knelt in prayer at Lemonade Church. His right side went rigid. He collapsed before the altar. Royal physicians tried herbs, prayers, even pigeon blood, but the king, who had once strode like a colossus, now needed a wheelchair. Word spread like wildfire through the plantations. God has punished the tyrant. In remote villages, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Even soldiers who had once worshipped him began to waver when they saw the invincible king reduced to dragging one useless leg. On October 8, 1820, rebellion erupted in Port-au-Prince and swept northward. Christophe ordered his honor guard to crush it, but this time entire battalions refused to fire on their own people. That night, in the vast bedroom overlooking a valley swallowed by darkness, the king sat alone by the window, his still functioning left hand clutching a silver pistol, a gift from an English merchant. He knew that by morning the rebels would reach Sans-Souci. He also knew no regiment would die for him anymore. Around 2 in the morning, a single gunshot echoed through the palace. Servants rushed in to find the king slumped on the marble floor, blood pooling from a wound at his temple, a spent copper bullet resting beside him. On the table lay a small note in his own hand. "I will not let them take me like a slave." Henri Christophe, born a slave, died a king, chose the only freedom still left to him, even if it lasted only the length of a heartbeat. After Christophe's death, Sans-Souci lingered in silence for barely 2 more decades. Then, in 1842, a monstrous earthquake leveled most of the palace. Domes collapsed, marble staircases split in 2, walls a meter thick crashed like divine judgment. Christophe's body was carried to the nearby Citadelle La Ferrière and buried in quicklime so that not even his bones could rise again. Today, when you walk among the ruins of Sans-Souci, you still find shards of red brick lost in the weeds, staircases leading nowhere, and massive columns strangled by strangler figs. Local people rarely come here alone after dusk. They say that on moonlit nights you can still hear the royal trumpets rising from the earth, the clatter of hooves on stone, and the voice of a man speaking in Old French. "I built a palace to prove we were no longer slaves. Yet perhaps I turned us all into slaves to build the palace." Sans-Souci is not merely the rubble of the modern world's first black monarchy. It is a question that has hung in the humid air for 2 centuries. Can freedom ever be built with the same tools once used to enslave? Can a people fresh from the hold of ships choose any path other than forging new chains in order to prove they too can be masters? And when the last bricks of the carefree palace finally rot beneath the tropical rain, the only thing left is the wind blowing through roofless corridors, a silent, endless answer to every blood-soaked human dream.